This is TWiT.
Biggest story of the week is that Australia has done what everybody else has been waiting and wondering. They've banned social media for everyone, banned it for everyone under 16. Doesn't go into effect until next year. I mean, next year. Like, it's a year away. But still, that's a big deal. I'm sorry this New York Times has decided to keep me out of here.
Every news site does this. Yeah,
I am a subscriber, by the way. I'll sign in and then we'll be able to see the story. Unclear. Even the Australian Parliament or whatever they've got there says we're not sure how this is going to be enforced, but it's up to the social media networks to figure it out. Is this a good idea?
It feels a lot like a kind of, this is a warning. You guys need to sort this out. It's going to get, or we're going to really crack down, because there's no penalties for the people that sign up. This is all designed to penalize the companies. So it feels a bit like grandstanding to some extent, like a warning, like you need to shape up or ship out. Very straightforward Australian people. They they don't pussyfoot around.
It sailed, according to the New York Times, sailed through the Parliament in the lower house on Wednesday, passed the Senate on Thursday. Prime Minister has said it puts Australia at the vanguard of efforts to protect the mental health and well-being of children from the detrimental effects of social media, such as online hate or bullying. They have to take reasonable steps.
Again.
They'll never be bullied again. They have to take reasonable steps, or the corporations will be fined about $32 million for systemic failures to implement age requirements. You know, these guys make so much money that $32 million isn't. They might just say, yeah, fine, whatever. We'll pay the fine. Mm-hmm. Devendra, is it possible? This is the real question. Mm-hmm. We talked about this a little bit last week. Is it possible to do age checks without violating the privacy of everyone who uses the medium?
I don't really think so. Like, we've been, seeing this reports of this happening for a while, but also this same conversation happens around like limiting porn access in the U.S. in some states too, and it is from what I've seen from the researchers, like it is kind of impossible to do that without infringing on other rights or making the experience more complicated. And also, I think this whole thing kind of just misses the point, right? Like, because kids have had access to this stuff for a while. It's really hard to just say, no, this is impossible now, especially when you're not putting any restrictions on it. And I feel like it misses the point of what they really need is to just really push these companies to be better rather than limiting it altogether. I think it's just like an easy fix to assume like, okay, you're making the internet safe for these kids. Kids are going to find a way around this stuff. They want to talk to their friends in other countries. So this is not really much of a fix, but it'll make the adults and the politicians in Australia feel better about themselves, I guess.
I remember when I was a kid that it was generally considered really horrendously damaging to kids that they would watch hours of TV every day.
This is what it feels like to me. It feels like our generation's television. It's like
or rock and roll,
rotting your brain. The previous generation's music. Yeah,
it's like prior to that.
This is rotting your brain. To be fair, though, this social media is a little bit more intense and pervasive than TV or rock and roll. But it does feel like it has a similar kind of this generation. This is what we're dealing with, and I think, my point about this being sort of, a warning shot is I think Australia knows, and the countries that have explored this know that there isn't really anything you can legislate here, but you do need to create the sort of a sense of we need to fix what's broken about these platforms, because there are so many benefits. I mean, when I was last on, Leo, we talked about this. I think we were talking about TikTok because there was something similar was happening, but there are so many benefits to social media and the internet and allowing children online, but there are obviously significant downsides and things that have to be policed and managed by either parents or communities or the government in this case. But how you do it and what the detriment also is of some kind of law like this. Like, are you going to, like you say, people have friends and connections that they may lose, and that can have a negative benefit on people just as much as cutting them off offline. And it's not just social media too. I mean, I think YouTube is not included in this. Messaging groups are not included in this. So it feels like a sort of needle in the haystack to some extent. we're going to target this one area and say it's bad, you're not allowed on it until you're 16, and then but you can go to YouTube and you can online message with your friends. So it's sort of putting the I feel like putting the cart before the horse. Let's come up with. There's plenty of great analogies that we could come up with, but in some sense, I'm as a parent with 16 and 13-year-old children, I appreciate that people are making an effort here to address some problems and bring attention to problems that social media is creating. But this type of blanket ban isn't going to is not a solution.
Imagine if
but it creates
Australia
conversation.
Imagine if Australia had announced a ban for television for kids under 16 in 1967. Yeah, no television for kids under 16. The difference this time is that it's technology, and there's something a certain group of people feel technology have this kind of attitude towards it, like it's dangerous magic. But I don't think it's any different than TV or radio or.
Yeah.
You know what the big difference is, though, here is that it is isolating and it is individual. So you are on
a phone. Watching Gilligan's Island wasn't isolating?
But you would maybe watch with your friends or your family, whereas social media, it's this, isn't it? It's the generation that is just this.
This generation, though, says, I am socializing. This is where my friends are on Instagram. That's who I'm talking to, much more so than somebody sitting next to me on the couch being a couch potato. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Doc Rock.
No, I was saying, okay, back then, when Gilligan's Island was a thing and Batman and all of those shows, I was the only male in my household, so I watched it in the basement by myself, and I spent a lot of time down there.
Look what happened to him.
Yeah. So I do feel that, yes, I understand why people think the tech is scary, but a lot of that has to do with, in the U.S. at least, it's our education system. Because when we had opportunity, when people like Leo and I dove into tech when we were young, everybody else thought we were absolutely insane. This is crazy. The internet's a dangerous place, whatever. And in the U.S., honestly, the media treated it as dangerous up until they all got their own sites and became part owners of these media companies. And then they stopped saying how scary it was, and everything on the news about at the end was go to our website, go to our social media accounts. So the parents, a lot of them, still have that it's a dangerous place heavily mired in their brain, because that's the way it was up until about early 2000s. So there's that. And then, well, all I do for my niece, I personally don't have any kids, but for my niece, we just tell her, we protect her self-esteem and we teach her to have some self-worth. And kids with good self-esteem don't get bullied.
Does it change your attitude if you know that Rupert Murdoch is the guy behind this, as he is the guy behind every damn thing that happens terrible in Australia?
100%, because he has a monetary investment to get you back to his forms of media.
Fox.
And not
Don't
new media.
you could argue Fox does more to harm your brain than Instagram.
Absolutely.
In May, Rupert Murdoch's News Corp, Australia's biggest newspaper publisher, began an editorial campaign to ban children under 16 from social media. This came straight from them, called Let Them Be Kids. Through the middle of this year, News Corp mastheads in the parliamentary inquiry aired emotional accounts from parents. My child has lost their life due to bullying. This is scandalously wrong. Now, on Wednesday, Paris Martineau, who writes for The Information, brought up the article she wrote for The Information last weekend about a company called Yachty, which uses AI to estimate age. And this is something that certainly Yachty would very much like to have happen in the U.S. as well as in Australia. OnlyFans uses Yachty. TikTok uses Yachty. The idea is when it looks at you, it says, oh, you're under 16. No more for you. By the way, Louisiana is doing this. They have age verification. I think it's for porn specifically. But let's say that this technology existed, that you somehow, and I'm skeptical, could accurately identify somebody's age by looking at them. Like to the precision that you could say, okay, you're under 16, you can't use this. Would it then be okay if we could do this in a privacy-forward way?
I would really wonder about where that data is coming from. There's just so much else involved when you're making these considerations.
Well, they admit they don't work very well on Asian people.
There's going to be a lot of gaps. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of things your data set is not looking at. It just depending on the type of person, depending on how wealthy you are, you may look younger than somebody else. So no, I would not have faith that this would.
Facebook is using Yachty. TikTok is using Yachty. It's going to be everywhere.
This all just feels like a distraction,
I always get
right?
quoted 8 to 10 years younger than I am, which is good. But
I'd say you're 37.
see, that's what I'm saying, Leo. You guys nailed it. Nailed it. Yahtzee. As somebody put in the chat, Yahtzee.
I've always been quoted older because I've had like gray hair since I was a teenager. So I'm gonna like mess up all these AI filters,
Well, Jennifer, you're the one with kids this age. You're the one with one kid who would pass and one kid who wouldn't pass.
Well, and my youngest has just become technically internet legal, right? Because we, in theory, 13 is the youngest you're allowed to be.
Internet legal.
Internet legal.
Oh,
it's funny.
my God.
I get little things keep popping up like Meta Quest. Like I get things saying, oh, now that your child is 13, they're allowed access to this, this, and this. And so my whole sort of internet landscape for her has suddenly opened wide up. Not that she wasn't already on a lot of these things. Although I've never let her have an Instagram account. I'm not a fan of Instagram.
She doesn't currently have an Instagram account.
No, but she and my son does use TikTok, but he doesn't post. She's not been allowed. He just looks at it. Yes, he's the scroller.
That's what I do, by the way. Yeah.
And one thing I had, my daughter's very creative and we just got a kitten, and I had sort of said to her, well, if you're interested in using social media, let's maybe do something creative.
Kitty account.
So we wanted to, create an account, because the main thing she likes to look at TikTok when she looks with me is at the cat videos.
You know what, Jennifer? That's kind of brilliant because she gets to do it. She gets to participate. But anonymously as a kitty.
Right. Not putting
I like
herself
that.
out
And
there.
be creative and all that.
Yeah, and that's the thing
then
I like.
also,
I mean, she
it
loves...
puts that spin, right? I teach my niece and nephew, they're both internet legal. That's funny. I never heard that before.
It's a great
I
phrase.
teach them, you have to create more than you consume. Now, that's easy coming from a creator, and I'm the Funko, so I'm like, yeah, you guys can be on the platform, but you have to create more than you consume. So my nephew makes beats and dance videos because he's a professional dancer. He's been on TV the whole 9 yards. And my niece, she's not ready yet. So
aren't we glad that Tipper Gore did not ban video games for people under 16?
I lived through that.
Oh my
yeah.
God.
We went through that. We thought that was going to ruin that generation.
It was. I lived in Connecticut in the '90s. Who was it? Was it Lieberman? Like one of
Joseph
them.
Lieberman.
Yeah, always about the video games and how evil video games are, and I don't know. Spending a lot of time on the internet and playing games got me where I am today. So
it feels like demonizing technology and demonizing the internet is really for political game, not because they really care. That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah.
I mean,
out of sync
I
in
think
our
that's
Discord.
That's very true, except for, as a parent, I have seen where there can be harms. And, there are downsides to every technology. There was downsides to rock and roll. There was downsides to television. And, I think it's always important to keep that dialogue open and to be looking for solutions when problems arise. I agree a blanket ban here is not, one, achievable, or two, really going to help because kids find the way around very easily.
Well, the Australian government says, we understand that. We don't care.
We don't care. But, social media has, we went through the pandemic too, which sort of hyper realization for social media because that was the only way people could communicate. So for my children's generation, so they've grown up with social media and it became the primary way they communicate. My son doesn't text message his friends. He Snapchats them.
Right. This is his social. This is how he's social.
Yeah. So but also the flip side, I think the danger, and I haven't seen it with my son because he's social in real life, but is when social is just digital and you don't go out and you don't, you use that as the crutch because it's so easy for children, especially, we seem to have, I saw a comment in the chat that there's been no proof that social media has any negative effect on people's emotions. And there's research on both sides. But I think it's so much easier to create personas on social media and be who you want to be. It's so much easier
You
than
think
in
kids
real
don't
life.
do that in high school?
But the point is, it's a lot easier
I was
to do
a drama
it.
kid. I had a persona, believe me.
But when you're in, it's a lot easier to hide behind the screen and then when you go
Yeah.
into real life, be a completely different person or be shy and not. And so I the healthy balance is the important thing.
But I think
don't
that's
think
the parents'
banning it,
job, and you do a good
that
job
was what
of
I was
it, right?
coming to.
Okay.
This is really down to the parents and the education of the parents, not so much the children, because we did not grow up with this. The generation that grew up with social media will be having children in the next 10, 15 years, and maybe sooner. And that we don't have the tools as parents to really understand the impact it's having, because we haven't seen the long-term effect. We just see these awful stories about terrible accidents or terrible things that happen to people that people connect to social media, when in fact there could be many other extenuating circumstances. But the internet loves a good headline about that, and that's sad. So we see this a lot, and I find that, as a parent, when you see someone saying, well, my son was driven to do this because of being bullied on social media, you can see why they're going to the social media was the problem, not the people. And the parents have to be educated, and they have to learn how to manage these types of things. I mean, one of the things I do is I use a program called Bark, which monitors my children's social media accounts and their messages and other things, and sends me alerts when it comes across what it considers potentially concerning content. What it tells me can be quite often pretty useless, but sometimes it'll come out with, something that was like, okay, now I need to go talk to my daughter about this or my son about this. And those types of tools are useful. You kind of have to fight technology with technology, but I just don't think a lot of parents know about these things and are using these tools. So yes, it's about educating the parents. And this is what I was saying about earlier on. This is opening that dialogue.
Hey, thank you for watching this little snippet from our big show, the News Roundtable, This Week in Tech. I'm Leo Laporte. Each week we cover the week's tech news, in-depth analysis, but it's also fun and engaging. You'll find it at TWiT.tv along with all of our shows. And if you want more, just hit the subscribe button, and we'll be sure to bring you a lot more great content. Thanks for listening.